Angels and demons and UFOs and aliens. Oh my, that's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Majorities of Americans believe in ghosts, aliens, the devil, according to a survey reported in The Hill in January of 2024. And there are several other surveys and polls out there that show similarly. Americans, by and large, are a believing group of citizens. And before I get into more of this, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network. That's the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California, RLN. Go there, check it out. Faith-based news offerings. Bold and Blunt is there. You may also get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com, where you can subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter containing my Bold and Blunt podcasts, video versions, and commentaries that I write at the Washington Times. But you can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. Aliens, Angels, and Deception, the Think Institute wrote in a recent essay. I guess we'll call this an essay. A biblical response to modern spiritual confusion. And then the essayist, the writer, goes on to ask, are aliens just angels in disguise? Here's a biblical take on UFOs, the divine counsel, and spiritual deception. It's a good question, and one, in fact, that just made national airways, national headlines. In a podcast interview, Benny Johnson, the host, Vice President J.D. Vance, the guest, their topic of discussion, UFOs, right? This administration, President Donald Trump's administration, has promised the release of much information that has been hidden from public scrutiny on UFOs and all that good stuff out there. And we haven't received it all just yet, but the discussion is going forth, and let's listen in. I'm going to play about a minute and 10 seconds of this interview because it was pretty interesting. As I said, Benny Johnson, host, Vice President J.D. Vance.
You going to release all the UFO files?
We're working on it. It's funny. When I came in, I was obsessed with the UFO files. And then you start getting really busy worrying about the economy and national security and things like that. But I've still got 3 more years as vice president. I will get to the bottom of the UFO files.
Okay. Have you peeked? Have you done a peek?
Have I what?
Have you done a peek? I mean,
So I actually haven't. I have not.
Independence Day.
I have not been able to spend enough time on this to really understand it. Yeah. But I am going to. Trust me. I'm obsessed with this. I've already had a couple of times where I'm like, all right, we're going to Area 51. We're going out to New Mexico. We're going to sort of get to the bottom of this. And then the timing of the trip just didn't work out. But trust me, anybody who's curious about this, I'm more curious than anybody. And I've got 3 years of the very, very tippy top of the classification. I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Okay, so you haven't been to Area 51 yet?
Not yet.
Some people say they keep the UFOs in Ohio.
Hangar 18, right? I've heard that as well. But I don't know. I haven't looked into it yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we're waiting for it. We saw aliens.gov. We saw aliens.gov.
I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway, but
I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway. That's what J.D. Vance said. And, there are a lot of Americans out there who believe similarly. Let me go back to this Hill piece. Majorities of Americans believe in ghosts, aliens, the devil survey. This was written January 2024. Majorities of Americans believe yada yada, what I just read, a Real Clear Opinion research poll showed. Among those surveyed, almost 57% said they believe in aliens, 61.4% believe in ghosts, and 70.3% 83% say they believe in the devil, which is lower than the 85.4% who say they believe in God. Just from a personal perspective, I don't understand how you can say you believe in God, but you don't believe in Satan. How you believe in God, but you don't believe in the devil. I suppose it's just the belief in God in those instances is just one of love, love, love. He tolerates everything and anything so long as you do it in love. So you can have, for instance, multiple sex partners. You can have sexual relations with your children. You can steal things at whim. You can take things at whim from stores, from other people, so long as you do it out of love, so long as you say that this is my form of love. So I don't understand how you can believe in God but not the devil, because it doesn't make sense that everything is good, 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 and nobody in the afterlife has to pay consequences for the evil acts they do in life. Anyhow, moving on in this Hill piece, other findings in the poll include 80.3% of respondents saying that they believe Jesus is God or the Son of God, and 84.7% saying they believe in heaven. Another 83% say they believe in miracles, though majorities reject the existence of witches and reincarnation. Some 52.3% say they don't believe in reincarnation, and 54.2% say the same about witches. You know, if you read the Bible, all these issues are pretty clear. I mean, if you have any question about any of these, where to stand on any of these matters, if you just read through the Bible, you will find all the answers right in there. Just saying, more than 70% of Americans believe in hell. And then this survey goes on to break down the respondents by geographical location. So belief in God is highest in the South at 89%. Second, the Midwest, 85%. Third, the Northeast, 83%. And finally, fourth, the West, 81%, according to this survey. The high belief in spiritual topics appears to be in line with a recent survey, The Hill writes, from the Pew Research Center, in which 7 out of 10 adults said they were, quote, spiritual in some way, end quote. That's sort of open. That can mean pretty much anything, right? Spiritual in some way. I believe in the God of nature and trees and environmentalism, and I guess that's what the left believes in, right? And that's why you have the left worshiping trees and not God. In the new Real Clear poll, respondents were also asked, The Hill writes, if there is a God, do you think of God as male or female or neither? Precisely half said male, 14.1% said female, 27.5% responded something else. That's a quote, something else. And 8.4% said they do not believe in God. So let's go over to this Think Institute piece. And are aliens just angels in disguise? Let's start with the alien question, the Think essay writes. Angels versus aliens, defining the terms. The Bible talks about all kinds of spiritual beings. Sometimes they're called angelos in Greek, and they have another word in Hebrew, but both mean messenger. Other times they're called cherubim, seraphim, or living creatures. But here's the thing. When most people say alien, the word alien, they mean something totally different. They're usually thinking about a physical being, possibly from another planet or dimension, who has some kind of body, maybe gray skin and big eyes. This is Think Institute writing. And a being that flies around in high-tech ships. Some people even think they're here to help us evolve or reach enlightenment. That, however, Think writes, is not how the Bible describes angels. More importantly, when people claim to encounter beings like this, often with spiritual messages that contradict the Bible, we need to be very clear we are not dealing with extraterrestrials. We're dealing with spiritual imposters, what the Bible calls demons. So this is the religious perspective that there are angels and there are demons, and the ETs that are out there flying around in high-tech spaceships are actually demons in disguise, which is basically what J.D. Vance, what the vice president himself said. So it's an interesting question, it's an interesting debate, and it's certainly one that does not have any clear-cut answers, but I have with me today a guest. He is a longtime researcher of spiritual matters and religious matters. He's worked everywhere and anywhere that matters, including at the Washington Times, and he has a new film out there, documentary that he co-produced that examines angels and demons and even talks about with some very highly intellectual scientists and researchers, UFOs, and kind of takes a look and answers the question, do these things really exist or not? Billy Hallowell, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
Well, I always love coming on with you and appreciate you having me.
So, author, journalist, commentator, your latest endeavor is helping to co-producer, I believe is the title of this documentary investigating the supernatural, correct?
Yes, Investigating the Supernatural. It's our 3-part film series, and we are on part 2 right now, which is Investigating the Supernatural, Angels and Demons. And it's the first project I've had a chance to be a producer on, which has been really, really interesting. I've learned a lot, theologically and scripturally, and then also just putting these things together. It's really kind of a remarkable process. So it's been a lot of fun.
So I want to say this for the benefit of listeners. You had sent me a link so I could preview the documentary, and when I got the link, I thought it was just going to be a couple minutes preview. So I waited until the day of this interview when we're talking right now to open it, and then I saw that it was the entire documentary, and I still only meant to watch a few minutes of it. But I gotta say, this documentary is so good. I ended up watching the entire thing start to finish, which is very extraordinary for me. So that's how good it is. Congratulations on that.
Well, thank you, and thank you for watching. Those who don't know this, and this is just the truth, in this industry and what we do, it's very hard to read the full book or watch the full movie because of time. And so I really appreciate you saying that. That's amazing.
And so let's get right into it. So as you said, this is part 2. One of the things that struck me is that the people you interviewed for this, these aren't conspiracy tinfoil hat wearing people with experiences of their own, personal experiences they're talking about. These are actual Ivy League professors and scientists that you talk to. And one who struck me was Dr. Ross, I think was his name. He heads up Reason to Believe, the organization, and he spoke of a link between UFOs and demons. And I know that sounds nutty, but I wonder if you could just kind of open there and relay what you talked about with him.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you led with that, because it does, a lot of this stuff sounds nutty and is difficult to talk about. And I think that's why a lot of people avoid talking about it. But what is happening right now is, in our culture, we have a former president and a current president talking about UFOs and UAPs, which they're being referred to now. They're talking about alien encounters. Obama said he believed in aliens essentially, and then kind of walked some of it back after. And so you have this weird dynamic where a topic that 10 years ago that would have seemed so fringe and that very few people would have been wanting to talk about in the mainstream is becoming a mainstream topic. And so that's really interesting. And so you find yourself in a position where you have to go to people like Dr. Hugh Ross, who is an astrophysicist, right? And a well-respected one, but he's also a Christian. And so he looks at this very differently than a lot of other people do. There are people out there who are saying, look, aliens are aliens. God created them. And, there are some Christians who believe this. God created aliens as a separate, species or creation. And that just is what it is. But that's not what Dr. Ross believes. Dr. Ross believes that these are not physical apparitions. When people say they've seen UFOs or they've had alien encounters, what we're actually having happen is a spiritual dynamic, is that the demonic realm is manifesting itself, is making itself appear to be aliens. And again, that sounds wacky. It sounds strange, but it is interesting because when we look at scripture, the Bible is very clear that obviously there's a spiritual realm that we can't see. And if you were to put something in a box and try to make it make sense, Hugh Ross's claims, they biblically make the most sense, that you have these demonic creatures that are essentially masquerading as though they are aliens to try to deviate people's attention. Now, some might say, okay, that sounds wacky. A couple of things that Hugh Ross says that I think are important for us to look at. The first thing is when people claim to have had alien encounters, those encounters are never positive. They actually mirror what happens in a possession with the demonic realm. They deal with channeling, all the things that we see in the occult. Those are things that we see happening with these alien encounters. But the thing that got me the most and that I found the most intriguing, and I would love for even more research on this, the locations in this country where people claim to have seen the most UFOs are actually the locations in this country where there are the most claims of occultic activity. So you can actually draw a parallel between occultic activity and claims of seeing aliens. That's really interesting.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I was waiting for you to finish, because I was about to say similarly that I think one of the points that he made was that the common denominator in his research with those who reported seeing UFOs was they had either a background themselves in the occult or they knew somebody who had a background in the occult. And it's sort of, he was making that point to sort of further the idea that these are demons actually pretending to be aliens.
Yeah, well, and that is, I mean, it's interesting, right? At the very least, a skeptic of this or a person who believes in aliens, they have to say, well, why is that? Why are the places where people are practicing the occult or involved in the occult or know somebody who's involved in the occult, why are those locations the places where we see more of this activity unfolding? And so, look, people are going to have that debate and that discussion. But one thing we thought was really important, and we didn't want to spend half the film talking about aliens, but when we were working on this, it was before some of the current disclosure conversations that were going on, and we knew it was going to be a big topic. We don't want a situation where Christians in particular don't have an answer. If this is a spiritual issue, Christians should have an answer to it. And my fear is a lot of people, because alien stuff feels so weird, you just sort of look away and you say, we don't need to think about that. It's too weird. But guess what? Culture's talking about it. Culture's thinking about it. And the same thing goes for the demonic, right? Like every October, Hollywood's churning out those movies. And man, I mean, they're talking about a Christian topic, and they're not doing it from a Christian perspective, Hollywood, but they're talking about a church topic more than some churches are.
Can you explain a little bit about how you got involved in this, the length of time it took to produce it, what sort of research went into it, what you ended up leaving out, how you selected what went in, just the actual nuts and bolts?
Yeah, no, I love that. This is really the brainchild of Jared Anderson, who is our director. And he came to me in 2023 We actually met in 2023. He works for CBN Films, and I work for CBN News, and we had not interacted. And I had seen his work. He's incredible, nominated for Emmys, and just a really, really smart guy. And we had started talking about the issue of the demonic realm and what that looks like. And, I sort of said to him, I wrote a book on this years ago. Maybe there's something there for the films department to look at. And we felt that on its own, that was maybe not the right fit. And he came back to me a week after we met, and he said, I really think we should do a TV show on miracles, angels and demons, and heaven and hell. And it should be 3 30-minute episodes. And so that was greenlit through CBN Films to do a 3-part TV show. So we would have walked away with maybe an hour and a half of content, if that. And we started working on the first part of that, which our first film was investigating the supernatural miracles. And we started doing that episode, and we realized this is not a TV show. I mean, there's just too much material. And that question of what do you leave out, right? I mean, there's so much. And so we decided we were going to do a film, and we would do a miracles film. And then, God willing, if everything went well, we would do 3 movies. And that is the path that we've been on. This is the second film. Our third film will be on heaven and hell. But to answer your question on what we, leave in and put out, we really spent a long time researching cases that were compelling, that had a lot of evidence that we could look at and say, okay, even for a skeptic, they're going to be presented with so much on the angels or the demons front in particular that they walk away scratching their head saying, well, if it isn't what I thought it was, what is actually going on, right? What is a natural explanation? If you can't find one, then you've got to deal with the spiritual. So there were things that we left out that were painful to leave out because there's so many good stories, but you have to make sure the film is the right amount of time and not too long. And so there are so many other things that you don't see in Angels and Demons that we could talk about that are just compelling stories.
Before we get into the specifics of what you want listeners to know about your documentary, the stories and so forth, I'm just curious. I'm familiar with your work, and I know you a little bit, and I just wonder, how much worry do you have either during the making of something of this nature or continuing into present day, that what you put out there for public consumption doesn't violate your beliefs in God, doesn't put out something that God wouldn't want you to put out? How much concern do you give to that?
I give a lot of concern to that. And in fact, I think when you're dealing with these subjects and these topics, it's one of the reasons that I tried to run from some of this subject matter years ago, because I felt like this is not something I want to do. When I had Regnery had given me a book deal years ago to talk about the demonic realm from a Christian perspective, and I was afraid of it, didn't understand that Christians have authority over it, and I ran away from it until Thomas Nelson came back and said, you should really do this, and I prayed about it finally, instead of just saying no, and felt like, what, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it the right way. You don't want to be in a situation where you're using these topics to scare people, because the point of this film is not to scare people. It's to inform people and to get people thinking about what it actually means. What does Ephesians 6 mean? When Paul says we're in a spiritual battle, that there's good and evil, and that it's not a battle between flesh and blood, and that it's pouring over into our world, right? And that the things that are happening socially, politically in our lives, many of those things have a spiritual dynamic to them, and we have to understand that. We want people to understand that without going too far. And even as we depict it, because one of the things that people will see, and they can stream this at cbn.com/supernatural, they will see some scenes on the demonic front that are difficult. They're nothing that's over the top, but things that are very reflective of what happens to people when they are dealing with possession. And so we were very careful in how we presented those, praying through every step of that, saying, okay, how do we not go too far with this? Because our goal is not to scare people. It's to be accurate and to show people what is truly happening. So yeah, I give a lot of concern to that. And every morning I go on a prayer walk and I pray about that. Even as we're doing interviews like this to talk about it, there's so many places where you can go wrong with this, right? Where you can actually use it as a tool to try to terrify people. And that is not anything that we would want to do with this.
And just from a personal perspective, my response, my reaction after watching this was not one where I was scared. It was really feeling that the material world is even more insignificant than, we're told to believe in the Christian faith, that it's the battle of principalities. And it was one of grief for that girl who said she wanted to keep the demon inside her because she liked the power. But maybe you could talk a little bit about her story.
Yeah, I mean, this Julia is her name. This woman, it really is
Very
shocking.
Sad. Yeah.
It's so sad. It's so sad because her story has an unfortunate ending, and not all the stories in the documentary do, but hers does. And Dr. Richard Gallagher was somebody who was brought in by the Catholic Church he was a skeptic, but he's a psychiatrist. And he was brought in to essentially say, okay, this person's dealing with either a mental health issue or a spiritual issue. And he was resistant to that at first until they said to him, look, we want you to do this because you're a skeptic. That's actually good. We want people who are skeptical. So we really find out if they see something truly happening here. And so he called Julia's case once in a century case because it was so shocking. A lot of people are dealing with spiritual oppression, which is not a possession. I mean, any of us can deal with it. It's spiritual warfare. She was dealing with possession. She was worshiping Satan, very literally worshiping Satan, and would have moments of not being lucid, being controlled by what was possessing her, the demons that were possessing her. And she wanted help. It's interesting. She was in a cult, the satanic cult, and enjoyed the power she got from it, but at the same time wanted freedom. And so she went to Dr. Gallagher. And to give you an example of how oppressed this woman was, how possessed she was, the night before she came to his house, he had these two cats, and it's almost a comical story, but it's not in the scheme of things. His cats always got along, but they weren't getting along this one night. He woke up, they were fighting each other, and he and his wife separated the cats out and didn't think much of it. They thought it was strange. The next morning, the doorbell rings, and a priest is there with Julia and says, hey, this is Julia. She's here, for you to help her. And Dr. Gallagher talks to her, and one of the first things she says to him is, how did you like what I did with the cats last night? And I mean, this is a woman who had never been to his house, didn't know him, knew lots of information about his background, how his mother had died, and was able to do something called remote viewing, which we did not include this part in the film. But she would be able to sort of sit in a room with you. And there are psychics and others who do this today, and people think it's a great thing, but it's not, because if you can do this, you're getting this from the devil and from demons. If you have this ability, she could tell you what somebody else was doing miles and miles away. So she could say, hey, if she's sitting with Dr. Gallagher, the priest, he's walking near the river, he's got a blue jacket on. She could describe him, and Dr. Gallagher could call that priest, and he would test this out. He would call the priest, and the priest would be, sure enough, walking near a river, wearing a blue coat, doing all the things she said. And so it's just a wild, wild, sad story. She ended up, not getting the healing that she had wanted, as far as we know, and she ended up getting cancer and passing away. But it's, you have to want that healing. And when you're dealing with something like that, it's just tragic. Now, the last thing I'll say on this is that Dr. Gallagher very quickly went from a skeptic to a believer once he started seeing Julia's story and others like it.
I can't believe that our time is already at an end. So I want to quickly ask you, where can people watch the film? And also, is there anything that you want to bring out specifically that we didn't touch on?
Yeah, I love that. So people can go to cbn.com/supernatural. And that is, you can donate any amount of money and you can watch the film. And so there's not a set fee on it. And I'd encourage people to go and do that. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories. We also tell, stories about angels. And I think that sort of helps with this, because you see the other side of it. You really do see that, the good and the evil and how they operate. And there's a lot of really interesting, story matter in there, including one story that I hope people will really enjoy, about Bruce Venata, who had a near-death experience, encountered angels, and had a miracle. So just to kind of tease his story, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, the guy that got crushed by the truck, right? That's who you're talking. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was amazing. It really was. Well, geez, Billy, it was so great to talk with you, and I can't wait to see the third in this series. Until then, thank you very much for being on Bold and Blunt.
Thank you.
And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.